Good evening. My name is Brittany Lee Lewis, and I'll be your host. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode on American politics. I'm excited to announce today's guest, Senator Thompson. He currently serves the 12th Legislative District in New Jersey. Thank you so much for joining us today, Senator.
It's my pleasure, and I very much appreciate the opportunity to join you.
I want to start a little bit about who you are, your background, and what motivated you to get involved with politics.
Actually, my interest in government and so on started back in high school. I took 3 years of history and government, etc., and was rather fascinated by it. That was in a little school down in Louisiana. In Louisiana, every year they have a state literary rally where they select one student in each subject from every school, and they send them to LSU to take an exam, etc. And I was selected all 3 years in the subjects of history and government. And so I had an early interest in it. Then when I attended college, I served on the Student Government Association. I was president of the Chemistry Council and a number of elective offices there. Once I got my doctorate degree in physical chemistry, I started work for DuPont. And almost upon arrival, some of my workers there pointed out the local Young Republican Club, and they suggested I join. So I did, and within 3 years, I had gone from being a new member, etc., to running a congressional campaign in 1969 in North Carolina. 1968. 69, I moved to New Jersey. We had a Congressman, Bill Cahill, running for governor. I volunteered my services. He made me Essex County Chairman of the Friends for Cahill. He got elected, and I've been involved in every gubernatorial and major campaign in New Jersey since 1969. I served here in Middlesex County as the county chairman for almost 20 years. And finally, at one point, our assemblywoman in my legislative district decided to retire to spend time with her children, and I decided it was my time to run. So 22 years ago, I ran for the assembly. I got elected, and the rest of it's history. I served in the assembly until 2010. At that point in time, just as they're going to do next year, they had to redraw the districts. They took all of my towns away that I had, except two. They couldn't take Old Bridge away because I lived there. And they added in 6 more towns in Monmouth County, 2 towns in Ocean County, and 4 towns in Burlington County. But the new district didn't have a senator, so I ran for the Senate. So since then, I've been in the Senate.
Wow. Long career in politics. Excellent. But, I see that you also, you are someone who has an extensive background in science. What is your take, based on your expertise, your PhD, on, how the current administration has handled the pandemic? Are they getting it right?
It's a rather unique situation. I mean, since I think it was about 1918, we've had nothing like this hit our country and hit the world. And you're very limited on what you can accomplish. Mm-hmm. I'm not too sure of anything else that could have been done that would have had much of an impact at this point in time. I mean, thus the economy was shut down, and we're still feeling the impact of that significantly. Again, you mentioned the AFEB, the Armed Forces Epidemiological Board. Oh, incidentally, I was also with the State Health Department laboratories for 22 years. I licensed all the clinical labs and blood banks, etc. Well, on the AFEB, we were there when AIDS came along. We had to come up with recommendations. The board, incidentally, the head of CDC is a member of it. The Surgeon Generals are members of it. We'd meet every 3 months at Walter Reed to discuss the health and occupational hazards facing our armed forces throughout the world. AIDS came along at that time. We had to come up with the recommendations how to deal with that. And in fact, that particular board every year makes a decision what the flu vaccine will be. Mm-hmm. So it did give me a good deal of background in these areas. But like I say, this thing, as I say, you got to go back to 1918 to see anything to compare with it. And obviously, this is not something that impacted New Jersey at all. It impacted the world.
Right.
And if you compare how we have fared relative to the world, uh, we're at among the better, not the best, but among the better in handling this. And we're not going to be able to get over this crisis until the vaccine comes out, which is anticipated close to the end of this year. And it is essential that when it is available, people get immunized. If they do, we'll get rid of this thing. But if they don't,
Do you think like it's the handling of the pandemic has challenged the notion of American exceptionalism? I know you've said that you feel like we've fared better than some of the other countries, but one of the things that I've heard people say their frustration in terms of being a US citizen during the pandemic is their inability to really be able to travel, because there are so many restrictions specifically related to Americans not being able to even go to our neighboring country of Canada.
uh, well, again, the more that you're out and traveling around and meeting other people and so on, the more you're increasing the risk of transmission. So unless we reduce the personal contacts we have, uh, we'll never get on top of it.
Right.
I mean, hey, I'm not happy about the restrictions and so on, et cetera, but at a time like this, unfortunately, they're essential. And of course, there is indication that a second wave of the virus is coming on. It's already hit over in Europe. Many of the nations over there are closing down again, et cetera, because of the spread. And we're seeing somewhat of a spike here, even in New Jersey. So we've got to get this thing under control.
Right. You talked a little bit earlier about how the pandemic has obviously shut down the economy, affected businesses. In general, the abrupt closing of the economy due to the pandemic has destabilized a massive number of New Jersey families. The state's unemployment rate rapidly rose from 3.7% to 17%, and today remains around 11%. So, what actions do you believe should be taken to get New Jersey citizens back to work?
Incidentally, of course, the national figure just come out from October. It's down to 7.7% nationally. So that's a significant recovery from where we were. Um, Again, it's going to be a slow return, unfortunately. As I said, once we get the vaccine in, I think we'll see things getting more under control, et cetera. But yes, my office has, with every legislative office, I've been inundated with calls from people seeking help in getting their unemployment. I think normally the state labor department handles maybe about 10, 20,000 cases a month. And here suddenly they were hit with hundreds of thousands of cases, and there's just no way that they could be set up to handle this. And we work with many of our constituents to try to get their unemployment situation straightened out, get their checks to them. And people are hurting. There's no question about that. And businesses, there's quite a few businesses that have failed.
Right.
They're not going to come back, particularly in the hospitality industry, restaurants and so on. But we have to get work getting these people back as soon as possible.
Absolutely. I want to transition just a bit. You've sat on the Senate Committee for Environment and Energy. And as you know, scientists have warned that global temperatures could reach an irreversible tipping point in just 12 years. I've heard some scientists say even 7 years, if we don't reduce dramatically the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere. My first question is, do you believe in climate change? And my second is, if you do, what measures have you seen taken or have you taken that you believe will help to combat the fight against climate change?
Well, actually, it's not a case of what do you believe. If you look at the science, it's there, that it is occurring. So there's no need to believe or not believe. Yes, climate change is occurring. Yes, we do have to reduce our use of fossil fuels, but not to the point of we're going to eliminate them. The proposal to shift to all renewable energy, well, first off, there's major costs there. Right now, your renewable energy, whether you're talking about wind or whether you're talking about solar, et cetera, it is significantly higher than the cost of fossil fuel generated energy. And it is only affordable by charging more for those that have the fossil fuel to subsidize the other. But in addition, if we suddenly did away with it tomorrow, fossil fuels, how many homes are currently heated by either heating oil or by natural gas? Hey, if you can't use that anymore, the homeowners have to change their heating system as well as change their supply and so on. And quite a few steps are being taken to reduce it. And of course, there are plans to, by 25 years or so, to virtually phase out fossil fuel. Thus, there's legislation in to, for one illustration, of course, electric cars are coming along, but there are few charging stations. So we have legislation in right now that would see to it that there would be numerous charging stations established in every town and make it easier to put them in at service stations, et cetera, without going through all kinds of regulations. But there are quite a few steps that are currently in progress to see some shift in it.
Yeah. Well, my next question is kind of a follow-up, and you almost alluded to it, but I wanted to know if you believed in banning fracking.
No, I don't think we should ban fracking. I think we should regulate it more, because you can do it and assure that there's not damage to the environment with the fracking and so on. So that it has to be carefully regulated to minimize any side effects from it.
I do want to transition to education. More than 7 months after schools closed in March, and as the coronavirus cases are unfortunately rising again in New Jersey, the State Department of Education still does not have a solid handle on how many students lack access to the internet or devices on which to learn remotely. I know that you're very invested in education. You sit on 3 education-based Senate committees. What's your take on how the situation is being handled?
Well, again, I think the state education department that probably by now does have pretty good numbers on how many people have problems with getting access and so on. This is something, again, that bang, it just hits you and is not easily resolved in a short period of time. With virtually all the school districts out there now working at a minimum on a hybrid system and some totally remote, et cetera, I would think that they have a pretty good handle on that. So the kids are able to access it, but there may still be some kids out there that are having problems, but I'm not hearing reports of that right now.
As a New Jersey native myself, it's no secret that the taxes in New Jersey, really put a lot of financial strain on the individuals that live here. How have you worked to address the New Jersey families that have kind of been devastated by the tax burdens here, while also ensuring, of course, that there's enough funds for some of the social service needs that we have?
Well, one of the things that we really need to do, Steve Swinney promotes it, and I totally support it, is we've got to reform our state pension system. Thus, billions of dollars are having to be put in right now to try to restore it to fiscal sanity. But we have to have some significant changes in the pension system. In fact, I am a member of the state pension system. When in 2022, I will have 50 years of state service. I started with the state health department back in 1972. But again, we do need to make some major changes on that, and Steve has some proposals there, which I think have to be addressed. We are having to put billions of dollars a year into trying to restore a solvency to the pension system, but thus current members should be entitled to what they enrolled in. But for the future, we have to change that to significantly. I mean, if you're able to save $1 billion or $2 there, that has a significant impact on the need for taxes in other areas. There's no question New Jersey is a very high tax state. And of course, the number one problem for the majority of our people is their property taxes. Absolutely. And with the other party in control of the legislature, we have seen no action in a number of years to do anything to assist with the local property taxes. The state needs to get more involved in that.
So President Donald Trump announced that he was signing an executive order to establish the 1776 Commission, a group that would promote patriotic education. And he also said that the National Endowment for the Humanities would be awarding a grant to support the development of a pro-American curriculum that celebrates the truth about our nation's great history. We know we're still counting votes and we're not sure who is going to be the next president. If it is Donald Trump, would you support this endeavor?
Yes, I do. where there's some things in our history we cannot be proud of, certainly, but that goes for every nation, every population out there. But again, overall, I think we have an outstanding history as a nation that we should be proud of. We have accomplished so many times in the time we are, and our democracy is looked to the world as, you know, a standard. So we have a lot of things to be proud of, and if you take what I almost consider minor by comparison points and emphasize those, then where's our nation going? So I agree with his recommendation there.
What do you believe is the number one issue facing the 12th district, and what do you believe is the best plan to address it?
Well, the 12th district is not unique from New Jersey, so the problems and the good things in the 12th district are the same as they are statewide. And the subject you brought up there, taxes is the number one issue facing the populace as a whole out there. And again, we've got to get a handle on our spending, and we are almost fiscally bankrupt. So we have to straighten that out.
Absolutely. We've seen sweeping changes in the drug laws this election. New Jersey has officially legalized marijuana, and we've seen that Oregon decriminalized hard drugs. Do you agree with these decisions? And would you support decriminalizing harder drugs in New Jersey in the future?
These hard drugs out there, well, the number of opioid deaths that we've been having keeps rising. And if you legalize them, it will even be worse. I do not believe that we should legalize hard drugs. Marijuana, while I was not a supporter of it, hey, it's there. It's kind of like when prohibition was eliminated and alcohol was brought in. It will create new problems for us. One of the problems is that unlike DWI, a patrolman pulls somebody over, they suspect they're DWI, they do have a simple test to confirm the person is inebriated and so on. But that does not exist with regards to marijuana. They have not been able to establish what kind of levels you could have that really would impair your ability to drive to the point where you are to be considered impaired. So therefore, for cases of driving under the influence related to drugs, they have to base it on the officer's personal observations of your behavior and so on. It's much more tenuous there. That's one of the major problems with it.
Absolutely. Do you agree that it should be used for medicinal purposes?
Oh, yes, I have no problem at all with it being used for medicinal purposes. That, of course, we already have in, it's legal, et cetera. And of course, as has been pointed out, while the constitutional amendment has been put in, the actual legalization of it, that is, the permissible use, et cetera, is going to be a while down the road. Because first they have to change the laws and decide, you know, a lot of legislation and legal stuff have to take place before it is truly implemented. And the Attorney General has made this point.
Last,
it's going to take a while to get stuff through the legislature.
right. Last question for you. It's a bit of a personal question. As someone who represents the great state of New Jersey, where is your favorite place to bring guests or travelers in the state?
Well, my district presently doesn't represent the Bayshore area now. My previous district did. And I think we have some beautiful sites along the shore, of course, depending on where they're coming from. That's if my son comes from California, he's got the shore out there. But for many other areas, to take him over, see him the shore, et cetera. And happy to take him down and show him our state capitol.
Excellent. Where can people go to follow you and kind of stay up to date on what's going on with legislative matters in New Jersey?
Well, they can always contact me on my legislative email, which is Sam Thompson, SEN for Senator Thompson, THOMPSON at njleg.org. I am We have 120 legislators between the Assembly, 87 Assembly members, 40 senators. Of the 120, there are only 7 full-time legislators. I'm one of those 7. So I'm here in my office every day if we're not down in Trenton for meetings there, etc. That's the easiest way to get in contact with me.
Excellent. Senator Thompson, thank you so much for joining us. It has truly been a pleasure, and we hope to have you back on again soon.
If I may add one more thing.
Sure.
Here in Middlesex County, where I live, it may have the most significant amount of Indian population in the state, and perhaps in the nation. I have been working closely with the Indian community here for 22 years. I have so many friends. They're not my legislative district, but nonetheless, I totally admire the contributions that our Indian citizens have made to our state and our nation. In fact, I attend more Flag Day ceremonies than most Indians do. Every year, I attend several of them, marching a parade over in Edison, etc. And I point out to my Indian friends that I am here and we are here in America because of India. Christopher Columbus did not set out to go to America. He set out to go to India for the spices and other things that you have. That's why we have America today. Thank you, India.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you. And to our viewers, thank you so much for tuning in.
My pleasure. Thank you.